Rain poured endlessly, soaking the streets and drumming against the motel window where Sophia Hale sat alone. The world outside was a blur of headlights and puddles, but inside, everything was quiet. Too quiet. She sat on the edge of a thin mattress, her suitcase open beside her, filled with the last pieces of a life she no longer recognized. The woman staring back at her from the cracked mirror wasn't the same Sophia who used to host dinner parties in a marble kitchen or laugh under soft chandeliers. That Sophia had dreams, love, and a future. This one had only rain, silence, and a heart full of broken promises. A year ago, she had believed in forever. She and Daniel had been the picture of success, a beautiful home, a growing business, and years of marriage that seemed unshakable. But appearances could lie. When his late nights became more frequent and his affection turned cold, she tried to convince herself it was just stress. Until one evening, when her best friend, Evelyn, accidentally sent a message meant for Daniel, a message that shattered Sophia's world. The betrayal came in waves. First the shock, then the anger, then the unbearable sadness. But the worst part wasn't the affair. It was how easily Daniel justified it. He claimed she'd been distant, too focused on the future, too hard to love. He twisted the story until even Sophia began to doubt herself. When she finally filed for divorce, she thought justice would set her free. Instead, it destroyed her completely. Daniel was charming in court, smooth-tongued and convincing. He smiled for the judge, spoke gently, and painted Sophia as unstable, emotional, and reckless. He had evidence, manipulated bank records, twisted text messages, and false witnesses. Her lawyer tried to fight, but the odds were stacked. When the verdict came, she lost the house, the car, and nearly every dollar in her savings. Daniel walked out of that courtroom victorious, arm in arm with Evelyn, while Sophia stood frozen, barely able to breathe. She drove away that day with nothing but a suitcase and the car Daniel had forgotten to transfer. It broke down 2 weeks later. The first night she spent in a cheap motel, she cried until there were no tears left. She had no family nearby, no friends willing to take her in. People didn't want to be part of drama. She became invisible, another name whispered with pity. Her days blurred into weeks. She worked at a diner, washed dishes, and tried to stretch her tips into meals. Every night she came back to that same small room, peeling wallpaper and flickering lights, and stared at the woman she had become. Some nights she dreamed of Daniel, not as the man who ruined her, but as the man she once loved. Those dreams hurt more than the memories, but one night, something changed. She sat by the window watching cars rush by in the rain, when she whispered to herself, "He doesn't get to win." The words came out quietly at first, but the more she repeated them, the more they filled the room. She realized Daniel had taken everything, her home, her money, her reputation. But he hadn't taken her will. That spark of defiance became a flame. Sophia started keeping notes. She wrote about Daniel's company, the luxury real estate business he had built on charm and manipulation. She knew his habits, his shortcuts, his arrogance. He'd always been clever with numbers, sometimes too clever. She'd heard him boast about creative accounting, how he made money disappear to impress investors. Back then, she hadn't questioned it. Now she wondered if those secrets could become his undoing. She spent her breaks at the diner reading financial articles, watching interviews, and learning how companies rose and fell. She started seeing patterns, the same tricks Daniel used to hide his greed. She wasn't planning anything yet, not exactly. But deep down, she was preparing for something. Every morning she'd walk to work, passing the glowing billboards that displayed Daniel's face and his company's slogan. Luxury, legacy, trust. The words made her sick. He was living large, flaunting his success, showing off his new fiancée, Evelyn, as if their betrayal had never happened. There were pictures of them on yachts, in magazines, smiling like a fairy tale. Sophia scrolled through the posts on her cracked phone and stared at them, feeling the anger twist inside her chest. They looked happy. They looked powerful. and she looked forgotten. But anger was energy, and she decided she'd use it. She began saving every extra dollar she earned. She skipped meals, took double shifts, and endured rude customers just to collect enough to keep moving forward. There were nights when exhaustion blurred her vision, but she kept going. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was rebuilding piece by piece. Still, the nights were the hardest. When the city grew quiet, her mind filled with the past, the laughter, the betrayal, the courtroom, the lies. She'd replay Daniel's words. "You made your bed, Sophia. Now lie in it." Every time she heard them in her mind, her determination hardened. She promised herself one thing. One day, he would regret underestimating her. Months passed. She slowly began to find herself again. She cut her hair short, changed her name at work, and stopped checking Daniel's social media. Not because she stopped caring, but because she wanted him to think she was gone, defeated. The truth was, she was learning patience. Revenge wasn't about anger. It was about timing. Her chance came one afternoon completely by accident. She overheard 2 customers at the diner talking about Daniel's company. They mentioned rumors, unpaid contractors, fake investors, and deals that didn't add up. Her instincts sharpened. She started listening more, asking small questions, pretending to be curious. Every bit of information was a puzzle piece. Back at her motel, she began compiling notes, connecting dots, sketching a quiet map of how his empire worked. She realized that Daniel's success wasn't built on skill, it was built on lies. He inflated property values, bribed inspectors, and borrowed money he couldn't repay. It was only a matter of time before the wrong person found out. But Sophia didn't just want to watch him fall. She wanted to be the reason he did. She just didn't know how. Not yet. One night, as she stared at her wall of notes, exhaustion hit her. She leaned back, whispering, "What am I even doing?" The plan felt impossible. She was broke, powerless, and forgotten. He had lawyers, money, and influence. She had nothing but hope, and hope didn't pay rent. She closed her eyes, letting the hum of rain calm her. She told herself to stop dreaming of justice. Maybe she should just move on, find peace, forget him. But then she remembered how he'd smiled in court while she cried. That image burned the thought away. Sophia looked at her reflection again. The tired eyes, the pale skin, the faint traces of the woman she used to be. But beneath the surface, there was steel. She whispered again, "He doesn't get to win." That night, she made a decision. She would find a way to destroy Daniel's lies. She didn't know where to begin, but she knew one thing. The woman he left broken was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, sharper, and patient enough to wait for the right moment. As the rain finally eased and dawn crept through the blinds, Sophia stood by the window, her reflection faint against the morning light. The storm was ending, but inside her, something new had begun. A quiet determination, cold and steady. She didn't know that fate was already watching, that soon a stranger would walk into her life and change everything. But that would come later. For now, all she had was resolve, and the hunger for justice that would soon awaken a storm Daniel would never see coming. Winter came with gray skies and cold mornings that bit through thin coats. Sophia was still working at the diner, still saving money, still waiting for her chance. Her plan against Daniel was little more than notes and ideas scribbled in a worn notebook. Some nights she wondered if revenge was just a fantasy that kept her going. Then one morning, something unexpected happened. Something that would change everything. She had just finished her shift, her hands smelling faintly of coffee and detergent, when a man in a long gray coat entered the diner. He wasn't a regular. He looked out of place, calm, polished, and certain of where he was going. He scanned the room until his eyes landed on her. "Excuse me," he said as she wiped the counter. "Are you Sophia Hale?" Her hands froze. It had been months since anyone used her full name. "Who's asking?" she said carefully. He smiled kindly, pulling out a business card. "My name is Thomas Grant. I'm an attorney. I've been looking for you for quite some time." Sophia frowned. "Why?" He reached into his briefcase and handed her an envelope. "I represent the estate of a Mr. Charles Beaumont. I believe you're his granddaughter. She blinked, confused. There's been a mistake. I don't have any family left. Mr. Grant shook his head. He was your mother's father. They lost touch before you were born. He passed away 3 weeks ago and left instructions for me to find you. Sophia's breath caught. Why would he leave anything to me? Mr. Grant opened the folder, showing documents with her name. Because, Miss Hale, you are his sole heir. You've inherited his entire estate, valued at $47 million. The words hit her like a wave. The room blurred for a moment. 47 million? It sounded impossible. She stared at him, trying to find a hint of deception. But his expression was calm, professional, real. I don't understand, she whispered. He gave a gentle smile. Sometimes life gives back what it once took away. Mr. Beaumont wanted you to have a chance to rebuild yours. For a long moment, she couldn't speak. Then slowly, tears welled in her eyes. After everything she'd lost, after all the humiliation, someone, even a stranger from her bloodline, had given her a second chance. She spent the next week signing papers, meeting accountants and confirming the inheritance was real. The bank accounts, the properties, the trust, it was all in her name. Sophia Hale was now one of the wealthiest women in the city. The first night she held the key to her new apartment, a high-rise with marble, floors and glass walls overlooking the skyline. She stood on the balcony and cried quietly. Not from joy, but from disbelief. Just months ago, she had been invisible. Now, the world had handed her power, and with power came clarity. Daniel's name was still everywhere, his face in business magazines, his company booming, his image polished and perfect. He was still winning, still untouchable. But now, Sophia had something that could level the field. She started with silence. No announcements, no sudden moves. She hired a private investigator named Jordan, a quiet man who asked few questions and got results fast. She gave him one task: learn everything about Daniel Hale. His business, finances, partners, secrets. Within weeks, the reports came flooding in. Daniel's company, Hale Properties, was not what it seemed. Beneath the surface, there were unpaid loans, forged documents, and secret accounts under fake names. He was juggling debts, hiding losses, and bribing officials to keep his image clean. Sophia read every report carefully. It wasn't just corruption, it was arrogance. Daniel thought he was untouchable, too smart to get caught. That arrogance was exactly what she'd use against him. She didn't want to just expose him. She wanted him to feel what she had felt. Powerless, humiliated and alone, she created a new identity. Isabel Gray, a quiet investor with an interest in luxury real estate. Through lawyers and shell companies, she began buying small shares in Hale Properties, slowly, strategically, so Daniel wouldn't notice. Each month, her influence grew. She became one of his anonymous investors. At the same time, she began leaking bits of information, small details about his shady deals, to business journalists. Nothing too direct, just enough to raise questions. Investors started to hesitate. His name began appearing in whispers online, tied to rumors and speculation. Daniel, of course, fought back. He smiled for cameras, called the rumors nonsense, and reassured everyone that his company was stronger than ever. But behind closed doors, the cracks were forming. Sophia watched from a distance, feeling a mix of satisfaction and emptiness. The power she now held was intoxicating, yet strangely cold. Each time she made a move, she wondered if she was becoming the same kind of person Daniel was: manipulative, ruthless, calculating. One evening, Jordan handed her a folder. Inside were photos of Daniel's new home and Evelyn. They were planning to marry. The sight of them together reignited the anger she thought she had controlled. Evelyn had been her best friend, the one who comforted her during her marriage's worst days, all while hiding the truth. Sophia stared at their smiling faces until her hands trembled. She remembered Evelyn's voice, her fake sympathy, her lies. The betrayal felt fresh again. That night, she made another decision. Daniel would lose everything, and Evelyn would watch it happen. She found out Evelyn had been given shares in the company as an engagement gift. Using her hidden position as an investor, Sophia began arranging subtle manipulations of the company's internal accounts. She fed the media stories about financial mismanagement and bribery, leading to an official investigation. Within months, investors started pulling out. Projects were delayed. Partners backed away. Daniel's company began to crumble from the inside, but Sophia wasn't done. She wanted the fall to be slow, public, so he'd feel every second of it. Then one night she received a call. "It was Jordan. You might want to see this," he said. He sent her a photo, Daniel, sitting alone in a bar, his face buried in his hands. The confident man she once knew looked lost, broken, small. She stared at the image for a long time. Something in her chest tightened. This was what she wanted, wasn't it? To see him suffer? Yet instead of triumph, she felt a hollow ache. Revenge was supposed to bring peace. It hadn't. Days later, she got a letter in the mail. It was from Daniel. The handwriting was shaky, almost desperate. "I know what's happening. I don't have proof, but I know it's you. You win, Sophia. I've lost everything. Please, can we talk?" Sophia read the letter 3 times, her heart caught between satisfaction and confusion. She had imagined this moment for months, him begging for mercy, admitting defeat. But now that it was real, it didn't feel right. She sat by her window, looking at the city lights. She could end it now, finish the job completely, or she could walk away, leaving him to deal with the ruins of his own greed. Her mind went back to the beginning, to that night in the motel, when she swore he wouldn't win. But maybe winning wasn't about destroying him. Maybe it was about not letting him define her anymore. She folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Her plan had worked. Daniel was finished. But instead of celebrating, she sat in silence, realizing something deeper. Revenge had changed her too. The woman who once sought justice now wondered if she had become just like the man she hated. Still, the story wasn't over. She would meet him one last time, face to face. Not to strike, but to decide whether she'd choose peace or finish what she started. That meeting would decide who she truly was. The broken woman he created, or the one who finally learned to let go. The morning air was cool and still when Sophia stepped out of the car. The cafe on 9th Street looked quiet, almost forgotten. Through the window, she saw Daniel already sitting at a corner table, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had probably gone cold. For a moment, she stayed by the door watching him. The man who once seemed invincible now looked smaller, older, broken in ways she couldn't have imagined. She pushed the door open. The bell above it chimed softly, and Daniel looked up. His eyes widened when he saw her, then dropped, as if he couldn't bear her gaze. Sophia walked over, calm and steady. Her heels clicked softly on the tiled floor, each step echoing with everything she had endured. She sat across from him without a word. "Thank you for coming," Daniel said quietly. His voice was rough, tired. "I didn't think you would." "I almost didn't," Sophia replied. "But I wanted to see what you had to say." He nodded, staring at the coffee. "You've won." "I know it was you, Sophia. The leaks, the investors pulling out. It all points back to you. I don't have proof, but I know." Sophia leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "And if it was me, what then?" Daniel's jaw clenched. "Then I'd say, you got what you wanted. You destroyed me." He laughed bitterly. "You should be proud." She looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw the wreckage. The arrogance was gone, replaced by guilt and fear. His once perfect suit was wrinkled, his hair unkempt, his eyes hollow. This wasn't the man who stood smirking in court. This was a man who had lost control of his world. "Proud?" she said softly. "Do you think this makes me happy, Daniel? Watching you fall apart?" He hesitated. "Doesn't it?" Sophia sighed, her voice calm but sharp. "For a long time I thought it would. I thought if you suffered, I'd finally be free. But I was wrong." Daniel looked up, surprised. "Wrong?" "Yes," she said. "Because every step of the way, I became more like you. Cold, calculated, ruthless. I wanted justice, but what I created was another version of your cruelty." He flinched at her words, his shoulders sinking. "I deserve it," he muttered. "You have no idea how much I regret what I did. Evelyn's gone. The company's collapsing. Everything I built is gone." Sophia stared at him for a moment, her anger slowly fading into something more complicated. Pity. You didn't lose it, Daniel. You destroyed it yourself. All I did was show the world who you really were. He nodded weakly, rubbing his temples. Maybe you're right. I just wish I'd seen it before it was too late. Silence filled the space between them. Outside, cars passed, people hurried by, life moved on. Inside the cafe, time seemed frozen. Sophia finally spoke. I spent months dreaming of this moment, of you sitting across from me, begging for forgiveness. But now that I'm here, I don't feel anything. Not victory, not peace, just emptiness. Daniel looked up, his voice trembling. Then stop it. You've done enough. Leave me what little dignity I have left. She stood slowly, placing a few bills on the table for the coffee she hadn't ordered. You think I came here to ruin you further? She said. No, I came here to end this. For both of us. Daniel's eyes filled with confusion. End it? Yes, she said. Because revenge doesn't fix anything. It doesn't bring back what you took. It just creates new wounds. She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. Sophia, wait. She looked back. I know I can't undo what I did, he said, his voice breaking. But I need you to know, I did love you. Once. Maybe not the way you deserved, but I did. Sophia's chest tightened. For a brief moment, she saw the man she had fallen in love with. The laughter, the shared dreams, the promises they once made. Then she remembered the lies, the courtroom, the betrayal. That love had died long ago. I know, she said quietly. That's what makes it hurt the most. She walked out into the cold morning air, leaving Daniel behind. The wind brushed against her face as she breathed deeply, trying to steady herself. For the first time in years, she didn't feel trapped by the past. She felt lighter. That night, she returned to her penthouse, the place that had once felt too big, too empty. She stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker below. Everything she had built, every choice she had made, had led her here. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Jordan, her investigator. Hale Properties officially filed for bankruptcy. It's over. She stared at the message, her reflection faint in the glass. It was over. The empire that Daniel had built on lies was gone. The revenge she had planned for so long had been carried out completely. But instead of celebration, there was silence. Sophia poured herself a glass of water and sat on the couch. The city below hummed with life. Laughter, sirens, traffic, everything moving forward, while she sat still, realizing how much time she had spent looking backward. She had won the war, but at what cost? Money couldn't fill the emptiness. Power couldn't erase the pain. She thought of her grandfather, the man who had given her this second chance. He had wanted her to rebuild, not to destroy. Maybe she had misunderstood his gift all along. She opened the letter he had left her, one she hadn't fully read before. The handwriting was old and neat. To my granddaughter, Sophia, life will test you in cruel ways. People will betray you and pain will try to make you bitter. But remember this, fortune is not meant for revenge. It is meant for redemption. Use it to build, not to break. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. The words pierced straight through her heart. For the first time in a long while, she let herself cry, not out of anger, but release. The next morning, she made a decision. She called Jordan and told him to dissolve the remaining shell companies tied to her revenge plan. She donated a large sum of her inheritance to a foundation that supported women rebuilding their lives after divorce and loss. She began visiting community centers, quietly funding programs for people who had nowhere to go. Just like she once did. Her days became fuller, her nights calmer. Slowly, the bitterness faded. She still thought of Daniel sometimes, but not with hatred, with a strange, distant pity. He was part of her past, nothing more. Months later, she received a small envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. Daniel, sitting on a bench in a quiet park, feeding birds. On the back, a single line. Thank you for letting me live with my mistakes. Sophia smiled faintly. She placed the photo in a drawer, closed it gently, and walked to the window. The sun was setting, painting the city in shades of gold and pink. She stood there for a while, breathing in the moment, feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Revenge had brought her power, But forgiveness had brought her freedom. That night, as she looked out over the city lights, she whispered to herself, "I'm done living in the past." And for the first time, she meant it. She had lost everything once, and somehow, she had found herself again, not through anger, but through understanding. Sophia Hale, once the broken ex-wife with nothing, was now the woman who had turned pain into purpose. Her story wasn't one of vengeance anymore. It was one of rebirth. And as the stars began to appear above the skyline, she finally smiled, not because she had won, but because she had let go. Moral: revenge may destroy your enemy, but forgiveness saves your soul. Sophia's greatest victory wasn't in making Daniel fall. It was in choosing to rise without him.